What I'm going to do, the strategy that I'm going to use, because it might be overwhelming to go through each one of these slides, so what I'm going to do is sort of present at the beginning, walk through the lectures, see how the whole thing was put together in terms of the course, talk about things that are important, give you the slide this is the essence of what I would like you to know and strategy for studying, and then there's this big slide deck. And I'm not going to go through all the slides because it will freak out and we'll be here until 9 o'clock tonight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to randomly go through and say these are the kind of things I'm looking for, but I'm going to post everything for you after class. Is that okay? So that way you're not having to worry about scrambling and taking notes and things of that nature, because everything that I'm going to talk about is right here. Just relax and take it easy. Okay? So, to start out with, oh, and by the way, you're wondering to yourself, well, if you're covering this, what are you going to be talking about on Tuesday? I'm working on something special on Tuesday. It's going to be a little bit different than this, obviously, because I don't want to repeat myself. It's really going to be strategies on how to maximize how well you're going to do on the exam on Tuesday. So it won't be so much content driven like it is tonight, because it's all being recorded. It'll really be discussing strategies on how to really, because by then, all this stuff should be in your head. Hopefully you're not going to, completely blow off the weekend, although you should respect Sunday. All right? Sundays are always a good day for family and friends and so on. So if you celebrate Easter, that's wonderful, but if you don't celebrate that, celebrate yourself in the coming of spring and to enjoy that great day. But the idea is that by Tuesday, if you're cramming, you're really in trouble. So the idea there is to help you think about not only how to do well on that third midterm on Thursday, it's also how to do well for the other finals that you're going to have for finals week. Because I've learned a few things along the way. I'm going to give you those points. Okay? So this is all about what you should be working on from now until next week. Tuesday, some pointers, and then we'll go from there. Does that sound okay to everybody? All right. Okay. So to start out with, remember we had our introduction, our orientation about public health, what it was, and so on, and what my expectations were. And then, of course, I gave you that first assignment to find an article on public health. And one of the things I wanted to show you is that there's not a day that goes by that you don't see something that's public health related, right? And that was really the eye opener for a lot of people, because you don't know public health is happening because it's so invasive. It's woven into the fabric of your life. Everything, from the air you breathe, from the water you drink, and so on, from the food you eat. You've all experienced that now for this semester. Then the next was making the case for public health. I'll show you a couple of those slides. But that's where I first showed you the concept of follow the money. By the way, there's going to be an exam question on that. And the answer is follow the money, right? So there's an answer right out of the gate. Because you heard it from Dr. Witz, right? I mean, he wasn't primed on what I told you. He's just saying, listen, if you follow the money, isn't it something that he's telling you? This is a guy with and he's brilliant, by the way, a crystal ball. And he's saying insurance companies are no longer going to be relevant. It's going to be about the hospitals and the physicians and you and whatever you can negotiate. So whatever you've got going here in town with IU Health or St. Vincent's, that's going to be what the future is. Insurance companies are getting pushed out of this, although if you look at the news today, the insurance companies have found a loophole in the Affordable Care Act in which they can kind of backdoor some of these fees. It's unbelievable. So people are all worked up about that. But it's an ongoing dynamic process. It's amazing to me to get into this business and to really understand it and get your mind wrapped around it, and especially if you can be a change agent. So I tried to make the case, and we'll cover a couple of slides on what's important. Next, remember Dr. Howell came in, right, from the Indiana State Health Department. How cool is that guy, right, coming out? I mean, he was the acting director. He was like the hoo-ha, right, the big dude, the big kahuna for the state of Indiana. And the thing I wanted you to focus on there in this presentation, the meta thought about this, is that the state only has so much money. And what are they spending it on? They're not going to go out there and say, oh, this looks like a nice little hobby shop project. We're just going to do a little bit of this, or we're just going to do a little bit of that. No, you're talking about important things like immunizations, right? Control of STDs, the spread of infectious disease, emerging things like West Nile virus and so on. And what was really neat about that is that you should have been thinking about this and say, the state has a budget, just like you have a budget. What are you going to spend it on? What are your priorities? Right? And the thing is, you can't fritter it away. Say, oh, I have so much discretionary income, I can do a little dabbling in this, a little dabbling. They don't. They have to spend all their money exactly on what their missions are and what they have to accomplish. And how cool is that to have that guy come up? And we're not talking about somebody in the ranks. We're talking about the guy that actually directed the Indiana State Health Program as the acting director for a while. Then I came back and we talked about life cycles. You'll be tested on that, and no need to take notes. But the key there is that what are the important elements in adolescence, right? What are the important elements in adulthood, your group, right, and older? And what are the important elements in the elderly, right, the age, the gerontology group? That what are their diseases? What are their issues of injury and illnesses and so on? As you know, there are differences, right, with children versus you versus the elderly, right? What are a couple of the issues with you in terms of what you have to look out for? Are you that worried about cancer as a group, as a public health issue? Not so much. Should I be worried about cancer? Oh yeah, right, heart disease and so on. What should you be worried about? Vehicles, right? Accidents, right? Right, what else? Suicide, right? Especially if you're white, right? Homicides, if you're a person of color. These are specific things that you have to worry about. And children, what do they have to worry about? Poisonings, right? A lot of the poisoning and so on, you know, and of course when you get older, it's sort of like when you're small you fall, when you're old you fall, you know, so, you know, issues like that. Those are the things that I'd like you to know, because when you come out of here, you say, it's not about the individual, it's what is the bigger thing? What's happening to most of the people in each of those age groups, right? I'd like you to know that. So that's what that whole thing was on life cycles. Oops, how did I jump down already here? Then Arun Bunia. This guy is a giant in the field of food sciences. I don't know if you saw him on the news. It was like 1 week after he presented on spectroscopy, where he's helped develop this new method on backscatter spectroscopy on bacteria, Staphylococcus and so on. And it's only been done here at Purdue. And now it's something that the world can use to quickly detect if you have pathogens in your food. How cool is that? And you saw the guy. He presented to you, and he just, you know, nonchalantly said, yeah, kind of a big deal. You don't know that, but I am kind of a big deal. But he did it through his work, right? He didn't really say it. He did it through his work. And what a treat to see him talk about infectious diseases spread by food. Remember, the difference is what happens to you at 6 hours after you eat food and what happens to you at 12 hours after you eat food in terms of what kind of toxin it is, right? And we get Jason Cannon there, what kind of toxicant it is, right? The difference between toxins and toxicants, man-made versus natural. So, and then Linda Cheatham, remember our judge? And she comes in. How cool was she? Public health law and policy. She talked about federal law. She talked about state law. She talked about local aspects of ordinances and knowing the difference between laws and ordinances and statutes. Know the difference between what's a statute, what's a law, what's an ordinance. Right? Know these terms. Why? Because if someone says, well, the state's got a statute on public health in terms of quarantine and so on and so forth, and someone says, what's a statute? I said, well, probably something about that all. Seems like this all the time. No. You have to understand the differences in terms of what legislative aspects are with a statute versus an ordinance versus a law. And it's about level, right? It's about where they're played out in terms of, because they all impact us in terms of law. Then we had that CPR. How many of you are certified? I know there's quite a few here. Good for you. Have you saved anyone's life? Anyone ever been involved in saving someone's life?
My sister has.
You? Your sister has? What happened?
Her theater director collapsed, had a heart attack. She was CPR with me.
And he survived?
Mm-hmm.
How was she after she did that? Was she okay?
Yeah, she actually got an award
from doing that. Yeah, isn't that cool? Saving someone's life. If you've done nothing else, but you've done that, it puts you in a place that you can't describe. You know, when someone is laying before you dead, and you bring them back to life, this is not a God thing. This is a skill thing that we should do for each other. And I can say with a high degree of scientific certainty, of probability, that all of you will experience something like that in your lifetime just because of the demographics. If you look at the baby boomers, people like me, right? What are the baby boomers, by the way, the age? What's the age range from 1946 to 64, right? It's easy to remember because you're just inverting the 46 and 64. Think about that, where you are and all these baby boomers aging up, and someone just, bam, they drop before you. No worse feeling in the world than to walk up and stand around and let that person stay dead. To be able to drop down on your knees and be able to do that simple thing of the CPR until emergency EMTs arrive and are able to apply the paddles and bring that person back to life. It happened for me. I didn't have a heart attack. Someone dropped before me. Life went into a state I'd never experienced before. It slowed down. It got really quiet, even though it was really noisy. It's like some of those special effects that you see in the movies where things slow down a little bit and get really quiet, and it's like time stretches out. It's like that. Because you're so focused and it's so intense, and you realize you're dealing with a dead person and you're trying to bring that person back, right? And then when it happens, it'll bring you to your knees. I guarantee it. It's a great feeling, but it's something that you will see. I guarantee it. And if you can drop on your knees and be able to do something, how much better is that than to stand back and just let it pass, right? Seconds are important. So I thought that whole thing with the CPR was a big deal. You'll be tested on those things. Then we had our first midterm. And then we got into vaccines and vaccinations from Jerry Heiner. You talk about. And I absolutely loved. Do you remember him when he would? I mean, I love to walk around with this guy in an art gallery, right? He does these photos and these paintings, and he said, remember the smallpox, right? They're doing, right? And they're basically looking at it, and they've got the whole idea from cowpox. They made the connection, right? Women who milk cows have these beautiful complexions, right? Why? Because they figured out that if they got a small amount of cowpox, they were also protected from smallpox. And so, these beautiful farm girls, these great complexions and so forth. So the scientists of the day, think about it. They're not physicians or scientists as you know them today. Many of them were just, barbershop, basically butchers, right? I mean, in fact, if you look at the poles, the barbershop poles with the red and white, that was all about the bloodletting of the day. If you had a problem, you'd come in, some guy would just, cut you somewhere, bleed you out, right, and try to get rid of those toxins in your system, thinking they were doing okay, and they weren't. So that's why these barber poles, they have this red and white thing going around. That's the blood going down the arm or some part appendage upon a patient of the day. Did anyone know that? Did you guys know that? Now you do. Isn't that cool? Next time you see a barbershop pole, it said bloodletting. So, anyways, Jerry talked about that in terms of vaccination. We have a problem in this country because there has been a small subset of people saying that if you get a vaccine, your kid's going to have autism or is going to have some kind of developmental issue. All that's been debunked. The guy who first came up with that said there's mercury in the vaccine, and mercury is causing autism. This was a British scientist, physician got disbarred, right? Disgraced. Could no longer publish, could no longer do anything. And big thing of fame. And they went back and said, this is a bunch of hooey. Where is your science? They couldn't reproduce it. The guy made it up. And then he had finally admitted that he made it up, right? But yet today, people are out there on the internet, these social networks and so on, and believing all this hooey that's going out there. As a result of that, I don't want my kid to be vaccinated, hoping that there's enough other people who take a chance so that my little kid is protected. If enough people don't do it, there's no herd immunity, right? Herd immunity is a test question, right? What is herd immunity? Herd immunity protects your kid, protects your family. So that's what his thing was. Then we get into Tom Turpin. Tom Turpin, remember him with the costume and everything like that, and talking about infectious diseases and so on. And he did his things. He said, "Bring out the dead" and all this stuff, right? And so he's all about infectious disease. He's from entomology, and I love the guy. He's just so good because he can teach and he can entertain, and you can learn from him. So that's going to be about infectious diseases. Pay attention to his lectures. I'll be picking out the high thing. I am not going to give you a multiple choice where it says, okay, pick out the conditions and symptoms of cholera. Now, distinguish between cholera and measles. Distinguish between that and malaria. I'm not going to do that to you. But he did pick on a couple of themes in his presentation, and I expect you to know them. All right, then we had Jason Cannon. Jason, toxicologist, right? I think he's going to go a long way in our university. He's really, really good. He's doing a lot of work in the area with laboratory rat models and mice models and so on. I think mice models. But most of his stuff's like Parkinson's and so on, where he's looking at that mechanisms at the neurologic level, at the molecular level. But he talked about if you get a spill, right, in the river, or a car turns over somewhere on the freeway and it leaks and it gets into the water supply, what kind of impact does that have? And during this semester, remember that big spill they had in West Virginia, right? People couldn't drink the water. Then they just rolled it out so poorly about these different politicians saying the water's okay to drink, or the company guy saying it's okay to drink, and so on and so forth. Next time something like that happens, what would you do if you were in charge as a public health official? I can tell you what the answer is, just for the sake of time. You get the mayor out there, and you get a respected public health official, someone who practices public health, who's assigned at the county level or state level, and the two of them there are talking about what's happening and where things are going, right? The two together, because if you don't put the two together, the politician's doing politics, just a public health official there doesn't really have the authority or the enforcement or the credibility with the people, because you don't have the elected representative up there. So, part of that was, what do we do when you have a spill? So when you get toxins in your water, when you get them in your soil, when they're in the air, it all affects our public health. Then I came back, non-work safety and health issues. We talked about that. As you know, I teach occupational ergonomics. I think some of you had that in my class. Those of you who haven't had my class will have it. And I talked about the occupational side of it. This is the non-occupational side of it in terms of what things that are out there that impact us in a negative way. Most of that had to deal with acute kinds of things, right? Such as traffic accidents, such as falls and things of that nature. Not as much about the chronic aspects of non-occupational, but the whole theme, the take-home point, if you were to just wrap it up and say, this is the essence of what you said in that lecture, what was it? Do you remember? You just had to push it down to one thing. 3 words, not follow the money. Not follow the money. Transfer of energy, right? Remember we talking about that? It's all about energy. The greater transfer of energy, the greater the impact, right? The greater the damage, right? So the idea was how to control energy. So if you've got 2 cars coming at each other at 50 miles an hour, that's a 100-mile-an-hour collision. Boom, that sudden deceleration, that transfer of energy can cause a lot of damage, right? That kind of concept. That was, I wanted you to walk away with that. Then, Dr. Santour talked about food nutrition and what's out there in terms of looking at the food chain and the quality of food as it moves through the system in terms of it being protected for us to consume. How many of you really think about what you had today? How many ate here on campus? And what'd you have? And where'd you go? You went to Wiley's, okay. I know, so you had the food court experience, which, by the way, I should say, they have done this good. They said, a 97% approval on campus last year for the best food. We were rated one of the top 10 universities, right? We have tanked. We have tanked because we're saving a few bucks. What's wrong with 70% or 72% approval, right? And because you guys would just eat pasta and pizza and it's okay, it's not okay because it's not as nutritious, right? Anyways, it bugs me on that level, sorry. But I also think we have a quality institution. You should have quality food because it does good things for your mind. Other than that, tell me what you have. You had a burrito. How healthy was that? There you go. So see what I'm saying? It's like your taste buds. You know, give me the salt, give me the sugar, give me the fat. Right? You only pay a lot of money for it, and instead of that really, really good vegetable salad or whatever. And you look great, so you can get away with a burrito now, but I can't. I wear that burrito when I eat it. The thing is that there was a process by which there was sanitary practices, inspections, and so on. Was it a meat burrito or was it a veggie burrito? Beans and meat, okay. So the meat has to be inspected and so on, right? From the time it's slaughtered to the time it's processed and cooked and put in that burrito, which is now on your belly. And the thing, how long would you eat? 1 o'clock, 12 o'clock? What time? 6 hours ago? How you feel? So we know it's not, it's not going to be anything in terms of the toxin within the food, right? So far. But if I start to see you go a little green on me, right? And the whole idea from Dr. Santor is that we take so much for granted within the food that we eat. And we have to realize there's a whole process to that we need to know. And then, right after him, Paul Ziemer. Oh, I love this guy. I mean, he recruited me to Purdue. He's the Assistant Secretary for Energy for the first President Bush, and helped build this program, the school, and so on. And you could tell from his lecture that you were really interacting with someone pretty special, right? Someone who has everything going. I said, I will take a pay cut, and I'll just come here and watch you breathe, because I will learn from you that much. I mean, occasionally you're going to come across people like that and just say, you blow me away. I'm motivated, I'm going to work hard, I just want to learn from you, that kind of thing. You'll come across people like that. Dr. Ziemer is one of those people, and he told you all about radiation, right? The issues of radiation, environmental exposures of radiation and so on. Pay attention to that because he was able to take a very complicated subject. Some of you deal with physics, and why is physics so hard here? I think because they probably don't understand physics, the people who teach it, so they make it complicated so you don't discover they don't really know what they're talking about. He does. He knows his stuff, and he takes such a complicated issue, and you'll find that in life. People who really know their stuff can explain it in a way that you fully understand. Trust me on that. If someone is talking to you and there's some highfalutin, fancy person, and they're talking gobbledygook, and they just can't bring it down to your level, chances are they probably don't know a lot about what they're talking about except a little bit. Right? So keep that in mind. Dr. Ziemer, on the other hand, he knows that much, and it's important to understand because so often we don't think about public health from the radiation side of the equation. Where would this apply here? Think about it as a public health topic. Think about it in a global perspective. Think about something that happened a couple of years ago that is still going on right now that is really not getting a whole lot of media attention, but it is just shaking and baking and causing all kinds of issues. And we don't see it too much today. Where on earth is this happening? Radiation. Fukushima, right? Fukushima's still cooking. Fukushima, they got these huge, these tanks of water that are flushing through that are contaminated, and they're filling them up. And if you go as far as the eye can see now, these huge tanks of contaminated water. Amazing. Crazy. So, think about that. This is a very real deal. Okay, I come back. Health communications, really important in terms of what's our message. What did you do? Why did I have you do the poster? What do you think that was? That was health communications, wasn't it? You're communicating to me what you knew, and I want you to do it on a molecular level. Why? Because there's so much out there right now. You can cut and paste something, slice it and dice, anything that you can think of, from autism to the zoonotic diseases, and it's not you. But because I wanted you to think at the molecular level, that's now you, because there's not a lot out there yet. And I know that you had to be creative in coming up with that. So the idea with health communications is that a poster in a snapshot tells me what's going on. Right? If you want to communicate something, that's health communications. Lisa Heinel, alcohol abuse, college, but you learn probably more about what's going on in college campus in terms of drinking a little bit too much, having a little bit of good time, and so on and so forth. Purdue tries to protect you because the so-called college experience, right? But heaven help you if you get behind the wheel and you're drinking and you whack somebody and you try to run from the scene, right? Life is over. If you apply for a federal job like the FBI, or if you try a job with the police and you're drinking, you're behind the wheel, that's a felony. You are done. Career over. You might get a job as a security guard. That's it. So it's really important then to understand the whole idea, consequences of the public health aspects of alcohol consumption. Who knows where this whole pot thing is going to go, right? In Colorado, more and more states are saying it's okay, go, smoke pot, get a little high. Problem is, people are driving to the pot stores, getting pot, and who knows, they might be lighting up on the way back home. So what kinds of issues are going on with driving and high, right? And who knows what combinations they might have going on with the pot. So the idea is drug and alcohol abuse are big deals. The alcohol abuse is the focus for Lisa's presentation. Cindy Knox, she talked about not only the illegal drugs, but also about the legal ones, right? What's the big issue here? If you were to bundle up her talk, what was she really getting to in terms of what she was saying with her talk on drugs? Well, absolutely they're dangerous, sure. We're overprescribed, right? But the idea is that what's considered an addiction, right? She kept going after the coffee. Remember that? She said, "No, I'm addicted to coffee." Is that such a bad thing, right? So the idea is that what are we calling addictive? What are we classifying, and so on? Just remember that if you take Ritalin, for example, just to jack yourself up, for example, I'm not saying that you do. Let's say you do, and let's say, hey, man, I am not getting this stuff in my head, and you give her your pills. What is that? That is a felony. You're going to jail. Yeah, and people don't realize that. Hey, man, I'm just getting this pill. No, you can't do that. It's a felony. Right? So watch out for the legal prescription drug, because they're saying it on TV now, right? So that's the take home there. I'll pick this up a little bit. So we had our second midterm. Then we had spring break. Yay! And then we had Terry West. Interesting guy there, Dr. West. All right, his thing is global or climate change, and he presents both sides of the story. Right? There are some guys, he is looking at atmospheric sciences, and his thing is, you know what, this might be a normal cycle. We don't talk about it too much, but for a couple of hundred years, up through 1800 or so, there was actually what's called a mini ice age. Right? Napoleon's march on Moscow, for example, lost almost all of his people, right? Because it was so cold that they talk about the breath coming out of the soldiers and marching so cold that it dropped to the ground like an ice ball. Right? So many people died from that. And they say, so this might be part of the normal rhythm of things, things heating up. Well, the difference is we have CO2 kicking up quite a bit. We have air pollutants kicking up quite a bit. Significantly more than ever recorded before. Not by looking at tree rings and things like that have been criticized before, but by looking at ice core. Right? The ice cores that have been there thousands of years. And we definitely are having an impact. And it's still, some people are still debating it as part of a natural cycle. My sense is that in your lifetime, whatever cycle it is, it's going to be more dramatic, it's going to have a greater impact than it ever had in my lifetime. And it's going to be crazy when the stuff's coming. The storms are going to be bigger, they're going to be more ferocious, they're going to be more crazy. And are we having an impact? Is man having an impact on the environment? My conclusion, based on all the literature that I've read, is yes, and damn them for coming out and exaggerating that early on, because it took away the credibility of the science behind it. So, pay attention to that and say, I don't believe in this whole climate change thing, that man is not having an impact on the environment. You need to look at the science again. You're welcome to your thoughts and conclusions about that. But there's enough science out there that says we should be paying attention to what's going on. So that's a take home for that. Then, last page. Dr. Manning on oral health. How cool was that? Anyone, any pre-dentals here? Pre-dents? Was that cool or what? I mean, they're up there terrible. I'm going, oh my God, wow. And it's amazing how they can rebuild everything, right? What was the take-home message there? One of the big things, it's very debated right now, is the whole idea of fluoride in the water, right? I think someone did a poster here. They did a questionnaire, and they said the majority of the students who responded hadn't had a caries or a cavity, the way the word is called, in something like 4 years. Well, I can tell you for a fact, if you don't have fluoride, or at least use it in the toothpaste, you're going to have caries just by the natural decay in the teeth and so on. So it shows you some kind of impact there. Then we have Pam Altonen, nurses, public health. We have some slides with her. What she talked about. What I loved about her presentation is that she was so focused on the local aspects of public health. Right? And the typical, used to say all politics is local. All public health is local. It's easier for me to work with you when I can see you and then we can talk about things than being on a database and dealing with big data at the CDC, right, or the WHO. So I loved her presentation and loved nurses to begin with, but she did a great job in public health nursing. All public health is local. Dr. Griffin, the occupational side of it, where I got into that, looking at disease patterns and so on. Why would I bring in somebody and say, well, that's occupational, man, that's not really public health. That's where you spend most of your time. And that's where you can have most of your information, in an occupational place where you can get this kind of information and use it at work and take it home. So that's the reason you got that exposure. Then we come down to Dr. Duerstock. How cool was that? The guy comes in as a quad, right, quadriplegic, right, very limited use. And if you notice, he kept shifting the chair that he was sitting in. You know why? Because he doesn't want to have pressure sores, right? Up here, pressure sores can get infected and he can die from that. But also any fluid in his lungs and so on and so forth. And he makes no bones about it. All he was saying is that all we want if we have a disability, and you saw his disability, is just a place at the table to say, hey, I'm alive, I can think, and I can do things. He's a professor here. Amazing guy. And he's building this lab. I love working with him. As I mentioned, my grandmother had a disability from polio. My mind is, I don't see people with disabilities. What I see is I see people with ability to overcome their challenges. That's the way I see him. It's just the way I was raised and the way I see him. Because I don't see him as anybody special other than he conquered, a lot of the challenges that he had. But he says, this is my deck, and this is how I'm going to play it out. And, love him for it. Great guy. So that's a take home there. Ellen Kosick. Crazy woman, right? She's a distinguished professor, a named professor in Cranard, right? Comes in and talks about the quality of life in terms of mental health. What I loved about her presentation isn't all the wackos that you see on a weekly basis, right? This 16-year-old kid running around stabbing people, right? What the heck was that? He's done. He's going to be tried as an adult, by the way, so it'll be interesting to see what happens to him. But every week you're seeing some kind of mental flip out. What she wanted to focus on is your mental health. So, basically, the guys, we have a lot of challenges going on right there, but really the ladies, you have no limits. You can be everything to everybody, but you can't do it all well. Why? Unless you have a balance in your life. You can be a mom, you can be a wife, you can be a professional, you can be all these things, but you can't do them all well unless you have some help, unless you have some mental balance. Right? And this is where she's going. And you can't do it unless you have a partner who supports you. Right? That was a take-home message right there. And there are ways of trying to get around it, to try to deal with that. I loved her talk. Really high-level stuff. Dr. Witz, we're getting to the end right here. This guy comes in. First of all, he operates, I don't know, an IQ about 160 or so. He comes in and he unfortunately didn't play with his spreadsheet. But the idea was, what were the 3 words for him? Follow the money, right? This whole idea of insurance and so on. I talked about that. What's happening with insurance? And insurance companies always find a way to survive, but it's the healthcare of the future is going to be you, your doctor, and the hospital network that within your community. Interesting stuff. Interesting stuff. Forecasting. Last one. How about Anthony today? Was he cool or what? The ladies, you had to smile a little bit because you want to be graceful and you want to do your thing, and I think some of that stuff just resonated with you, and I'm sure you did much more as an observer than being the one that he was talking about. But guys, I can tell you right now, I grew up in a working class family, and I made as many mistakes as you possibly make, including tucking my napkin in my pants, right? Like I didn't want to lose that bad boy. And you forget about it. You're walking around, you got a kilt, right? What's that? But the thing about it is, it's what they remember about, and where this whole idea comes from, seasoning your food, for example, before you taste it. That actually goes back to Henry Ford. I grew up in the auto industry world in Dearborn, Michigan. Henry Ford was bringing this executive, and who was interviewing for the job. He's a finalist. And he comes and invites him out to dinner. And the guy's thinking, well, we're just going to have small talk and going to finalize things, fill out the contract, so on and so forth. And Henry just wanted to see how this guy behaved at dinner in terms of his interactions. Dinner shows up, nice steak and everything. He grabs the salt and the pepper and he shakes it and he just seasons it right there. And Henry Ford says, hey, nice meeting you, shook his hand and walked off. And the guy goes, what happened? He said, Mr. Ford doesn't want to deal with anybody who doesn't first taste their food and seasons it. In other words, they prejudge something before they've actually had a chance to experience it. Right? So prejudging is so critical here. And Anthony's talking about that kind of things, that people are prejudging you as you walk in, and you don't want to give them anything to hold on to. Right? You don't want them to give them anything to remember and say, boy, that was just not right. Right? And then the whole idea about being kind to people, right? People who serve you and so on. How many of you notice the cleaning staff at Purdue? How many of you have really seen, or are they invisible people? I mean, you can be fair about this. A lot of times, you don't see them. They're just, it's like, come in really quietly, come fresh. But you look at this campus. It's beautiful. No graffiti, no trash, no stuff blowing around on this campus. You go to other campuses around this country, you got trash blowing around, you've got graffiti. You go in the bathroom stall, you're sitting there contemplating yourself, and you're looking at all this crap on the bathroom walls and so on and so forth, on the stalls. You don't see that here. If it's there, it's gone within 24 hours. Right? It's cleaned up. Who makes that happen? The people who make this university what it is. Right? If it doesn't look great, then you're not going to feel great. And the idea is just say, hey, thanks for doing a great job. Well, just acknowledge, right? Because they're people too. And they're doing the best they can. So that was his take-home message there. You turned in your posters. Then we have our overview on Tuesday. We have our third midterm. And what I'm just going to do here is, this is it. This is what you came for. Right here. And it's here, so I'll post it. To start out with, it's going to be comprehensive. Number 2, there's going to be 70 to 75 questions. The second midterm, you had 60 questions. So you're going to have 10 to 15 more questions. They're going to be multiple choice. There are going to be questions that involve using your calculator. There's going to be some quantitative questions. The weight of those questions will be more than the multiple choice questions, the qualitative questions. Most of those questions will be things like calculating rates and proportions and ratios. Isn't it interesting? The SAT now is saying, oh, geez, we should probably be, testing people on things that are kind of practical, like rates and proportions and so on. You're going to be tested on that. Why? Because if you don't know the denominator, how many people live on the planet, for example? Give me the number. 7 billion, right? How many people live in the United States? About 317 million, right? How many people live in the state of Indiana? There's 3 questions you got right already. Look at that. How cool is that? Right? That's the kind of stuff you need to know. Why is that important? Because that's the denominator. Once you've got that, and it says, well, we've had 10 cases of malaria that just, came out. Now you've got your numerator, right? And we can calculate our prevalence. We can calculate our incidence. We can calculate severity rates and so on and so forth because we have a denominator and we have a numerator, right? So that's the beauty of that. So you'll have those kinds of questions to analyze. 80% of the questions will be from the lectures. Of that 80%, about 80% of those questions are going to come from this slide deck. So I'm going to give you that much. How's that sound? Is that okay? So there you go. I'm not going to give it all to you, but the essence of it is going to be from the slide deck. 10% from your readings. Okay, so just going through. I am not going to find something that's buried as a footnote somewhere and test you on it. I won't do that to you. There's so much information out there. You're not going to get that kind of thing. But if you have a major table that's going to be somewhat related to the lecture material, I'll probably use that information. But again, it's 10%. The other 10% is from the CDC modules, right? The 6 modules. If you got 9% or better, you should be fine because you've seen it, you've done it, you've answered it, you got it right, and it should be familiar to you. Okay? So the idea would be, and I'll be fair, the way it'll probably be presented to you would be in a table, and I'll ask you to do a calculation based upon a certain set of conditions in which you'll extract that information from a table. Fair enough? That helps you a little bit. So just some off-the-wall numbers here and there, just looking at a table and say, what does that mean when I see these numbers? You know, I may ask you, what is it overall? I may ask you, if you're a female, answer for females in terms of what the incidence rate of this particular disease might be. Or if you're a male, answer it that way. I may have you do it that way. So I'm working out those details, but it'll be something along that line. So that's it. That's the essence of it right there. And then,
are any of the questions like from the first 2 midterms, or are they all like new?
They will be related to the first and second midterm, like that, but they won't be the same kind of question. Like, for example, I asked you a number of people on the planet, something like that. I think I asked that question. I may twist that a little bit and say, okay, you know, what are we looking at? What might it be in 2025? Because remember, I gave that number too, right? So it's something of that nature. What are the largest countries in the world? Right? So we know what's the largest country by population? China, right? What's it going to be in 2050? India, right? Whoa, look at you. Boom. Dale, half the test is over. Go home. We're done. All right. So, last but not least, this is a guideline. These slides that you're going to see, and I'm just going to quickly show you them and get you out of here. It is not a fine line in terms of saying, if I just study this slide deck, I'm good to go. If you studied it, it's going to focus you a little bit and say, what I hope you get from this is that when you look through all that, you say, wow, you're going back, you're looking at this stuff for a second time, but you're seeing it for the first time in terms of the entire breadth of what I want you to take home with you in public health. It is just such a cool area and skill to have. And I want you to walk away here feeling like, you know what, I took a course here, it was a pain in the keister, but I think I learned something. And that's what I want you to do, and that's why we're having this review session. So, anyways, I'm not going to go through that. I'll kill you with these slides, but I'll show you kind of how ugly it is. You can see that, but basically, I just roll it down. And what I've done is I tried to put in each of the lectures, the first slide, so that you know, okay, I've got that set down, I'm going to the next one, and so on, so you can follow that. All right, so I pulled all these out for you. And again, for example, if we go look at something like this, emerging and re-emerging infectious disease and so on and so forth. I may go through and we'll look at something, but I'm not going to ask you to say name. Three of the 5 are emerging infectious diseases. 2 of them are not. That's not going to happen. I'm not going to do that to you. But I may ask you something about Ebola, for example, right? You hemorrhage from the inside. Right? This is such a nasty disease, but if you remember, the take-home message is that it is not extremely contagious by its nature. It's not as robust an infectious disease, even though it's horrendous. So it's not going to spread as fast as influenza, things of that nature. So keep that in. So if you see right here, we're going down. Freaked out, locked up. I locked it up. Oh my God! Oh, here we go. So this is a big one. Right here. Remember this slide coming up? Age, and the thing the kicker, if you look at your group up here, look what comes across in terms of unintentional injuries and so on. Rank number 1, all the way across the board there, for all the way up through the age of 44. And then you come down and you look at suicide, kicking in at the age of 10, rank 3, and then it kicks up to number 2, right? And it gets up to the older ages. And that's a big public health issue, mental health. And if you saw the Sunday paper, it's like the paper says something that you already know. It says mental health crisis, right? Well, yeah. Okay. Are you just discovering this, Mr. Writer? Right? No. It's been out there for some time, ever since the Kennedy years, when they basically started shutting down all the mental health facilities around the country. When the government stopped funding this and turned it over to the states, and the states started running out of money, this is what's happening. Right? It's really coming back to haunt us now. And it's taken a generation, a little more than a generation, for this really to come back up and get after us. So we fold down. If it's blank there, I'll clean that up. Don't worry about it. Nothing there. Nothing there. All right, 3 less questions to deal with. How about that? So anyways, you got your pyramid. Oh, look at the infectious disease stuff. And then this is kind of cool. Epidemiology, it's a correlation, not a causation, right? But if you get enough correlation, you can point to the smoking gun, right? Do we have enough on e-cigarettes right now to say it's a major health problem? We really don't, because it's a delivery system for nicotine. Yes, we're delivering an addictive drug. They're saying it's a healthy choice because now you're not smoking a cigarette and getting all those tars, right? All those carcinogens with it. So people are now promoting it as a healthy choice. No. We don't know enough about that. Anything that's addictive is not a healthy choice. I'm telling you. So, but we don't know. So we have to have the evidence to be able to tell us enough correlation to get us going. Almost there, guys. So you see bugs, bellies, all kinds of things going on. Pyramids, energy transfer. And you finally get all the way down right here to the end. I covered it all, and I'll cover Anthony's thing too. Apparently he put a couple PDFs up there for me to post for you. Anyway, we get down to the very end, you know, and Dr. Witz's thing about follow the money and so on, and in terms of that. Etiquette and manners, I did put that in. That was his thing. But here, follow the money, and then, you know, slide 304. Basically, good luck. Study hard. Do well. Get some sleep. And don't cram all night before. Life is on a 48-hour cycle, so if you're going to do it, get a good night's sleep before so you can do it on the exam, because your thinking is going to be better for you if you don't know the answer than if you're totally fatigued.